Good morning, friends. There is a little problem with the video, so I hope that this will change. Can you all hear the audio? Okay, so you can hear the audio. We're just having a problem with the video, it seems. Sorry about that. So it's the wheel of samsara that we're going to figure out, hopefully, in perhaps, well, tomorrow evening. This evening. So we are currently on retreat here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So I will be the one who will be sharing Dhamma this week, as my fellow monastics are meditating, and I will be joining in my fellow monastics after the live streams and meditation, and I'm the one who has been assigned to do the live streams. Hence the lack of technology that is happening, because we don't have a little team going on. So yes, Eleanor, I see a black screen with a rotating little white dash circle, which is what we like to call the YouTube icon of rebirth, of constant rebirth. So welcome to Jens, Gita, and of course Eleanor, and hello to Poonam, Michael, Alec, Melody, Elaine. Welcome, friends. Hello, Gita. All right, so, and hi to Rich. So you won't see my face, but hopefully you'll see my voice, and definitely I can read all your comments. So we can start by reading the sutta all in one breath, contemplating it for a few seconds, and then we'll go and discuss it together, right? So we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham namam sangam namassami. Atsavati. Then in the morning the Bhikkhuni Upacala dressed. She sat down at the foot of a tree for the day's abiding. Then Māra, the evil one, approached the Bhikkhuni Upacālā and said to her, "Where do you wish to be reborn, Bhikkhuni?" "I do not wish to be reborn anywhere, friend. There are Tavatimsa and Yamadevas and Devatas of the Tusita realm, Devas who take delight in creating and Devas who exercise control. Direct your mind there to those realms and you'll experience delight." The Bhikkhuni Upacālā replied, "There are Tavatimsa and Yamadevas and Devatas of the Tusita realm, Devas who take delight in creating and Devas who exercise control. They are still bound by sensual bondage. They come again under Māra's control. All the world is on fire. All the world is burning. All the world is ablaze. All the world is quaking. That which does not quake or blaze, that to which worldlings do not resort, where there is no place for Māra, that is where my mind delights." Then Māra, the evil one, realizing the Bhikkhuni Upacālā knows me, sad and disappointed, disappeared right there. All right, so we can close our eyes and contemplate the words of the sutta for a few moments. All right, and you can open your eyes gently. Beautiful sutta. As with all the suttas of the Pali Canon, we always say that here at Empty Cloud, much Dhamma Sukha. So this is part of the Bhikkhuni Samyutta that we've been progressively going through during sutta study in the past weeks. And this is a sutta with Upacala, who is one of the sisters of Venerable Sariputta, who is very well known throughout the Pali Canon as being one of the major disciples of the Buddha. And as with all the bhikkhunis in the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, Venerable Upacala is also reputed to be enlightened. And just as the other monastics, she goes to the blind man's grove for the day's abiding. So goes first on alms rounds, then gets all her food and goes to what we've seen was the favorite spot for everyone, whether it was bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, to go and practice meditation. And as it happened with all the other bhikkhunis, as well as many other practitioners, Māra comes to pay her a visit. And in this particular case, Māra presents a question of coming with an assumption that the bhikkhuni has a particular desire to be reborn in a particular state of being. And we can see it both as perhaps being reborn in another plane, so after birth, but also being reborn in another sort of state of existence in her conventional sort of life. So what we tend to think of life. So this one life, when we see the body coming to birth, and when we see the body coming into cessation. And surprisingly, she says, "I do not wish to be reborn anywhere, friend." I say surprising because if someone normally asks us this question, perhaps not phrasing it in the terms of being reborn, where do you want to be reborn, but rather more, what do you wish to achieve? What do you wish to accomplish? What are your sort of plans for the future? If we look at our minds, we normally have lots of answers for that, don't we? Perhaps we want a promotion at our job. Perhaps we want to live in a world where the pandemic is over, or there are no pandemics whatsoever, where our health is great, where all our friends and family are all together and safe and happy. So there's lots of different aspirations that we have for the future. So it is surprising that someone if someone were to reply, "I do not wish for anything at all. So I do not wish to be reborn anywhere." And Māra replies to Venerable Upacala, presenting the sort of different realms of existence that are the most aspired to. So he starts explaining that there are Tavatimsa and Yama Devas and Devatas of the Tusita realm, Devas who they take delight in creating, and Devas who exercise control. And if you're slightly familiar with the Buddhist cosmology, you'll know that it's not terribly different, actually, from I come from Italy, so the main form of religion there is Catholicism. And so there's certain different realms of existence in the Catholic cosmology too, which are not terribly different on a superficial sort of glimpse from the Buddhist cosmology. So you have a lot of different happy destination, sort of paradise realms. And there's also some hell realms. One of the masterpieces of Italian culture is the Divine Comedy from Dante Alighieri, and he goes into depth into exploring all of these different realms. So there's a similar sort of equivalence, or similar, you would say, planes of existence in Buddhism. The main difference is that all of these planes of existence are impermanent. And of course, the main difference is actually that what we consider the paradise in Catholicism is actually, there's different ways to access it in Buddhism, and also the quote unquote God creator of that paradise is also impermanent. Himself or themself or herself, whatever kind of gender that God creator has. So there's normally we talk about in terms of the paradise or the most pleasant realms of existence. We normally talk about in Buddhism the material world, the fine material world, and the sensuous world. And actually, the sensuous world starts with, like, the lower plane within this plane is the plane of human beings, which is actually why also we talk about it being an incredibly good and special rebirth, special state of existence to have the shape and form of a human being. It is extraordinarily rare, the Buddha says, to take a human rebirth, and it's also a precious state of existence because we have a good balance of dukkha, so suffering, and a good balance also of sensual pleasure, so that we have actually the opportunity to practice and to not constantly be in a state of deprivation. Like if you're in a sort of more natural environment, even here in New Jersey, since we've moved to the suburbs, in comparison to the city, we have lots of different wildlife living around the monastery. And especially now that the fall has set in and the plants have started to die out, they're all in a constant state of suffering, looking for basic needs. The food, they're food deprived, but also in the summertime, actually, where there's the most abundance, the animals are not really doing that great. So there's this constant struggle of finding food and looking for shelter, not being, if they're not predators, paying attention to predators as not to become prey. It's a really, constant state of fear and anxiety. So human beings, even though we have a little bit of that taste of fear, our experience is not pure bliss. We're definitely in a better state of existence than the majority of the animal world. At the same time, though, our existence, once again, is not exclusively marked by the pleasant, which is actually a sort of positive thing, because it once again gives us better conditions to understand suffering. So without getting into too much detail about the other planes of existence, I will just fundamentally kind of give some broad strokes. So once again, the other realms within the sensuous world, so the Kamaloka, as they define it, it's fundamentally a sort of paradise place where one can have access to it by practicing generosity, by developing virtue and wisdom. So fundamentally practicing the precepts of Buddhism, and also doing all the practices of giving and of letting go. So there's lots of different devas that dwell either creating things, which is what Māra is talking about. So if you're a creative person, perhaps you might have a bit of a taste of that in the human being world, in the human being realm. So artists, for example, or any kind of creative person delights in the objects of that they create, or in whatever idea that surfaces in their mind, if they're perhaps writers. So there's a lot of sensual pleasure that can be achieved by something that we can make, whether it's, once again, a physical object or it's a mental object. And then there are simply places like in the Tusita heaven where it's just a great place where to be. So it's a realm where there's much pleasantness and delight. Then there's, the Tavatimsa realm where Saka, who is one of the most exemplary icons of virtue, dwells there. And so it's a little bit, when you read those descriptions, a bit kind of like the Roman refigurations of the mythology in the Roman times. But it's also very important to know that actually even Māra lives in a happy destination. So in one of these realms. And it's the realm where actually they are enjoying sensual pleasure that are creating by others, rather than creating it themselves. There are other beings that create them for them. And that's why you also see that Māra is, in fact, the personification of delusion, personification of desire, personification of greed. Even though, once again, he lives in actually a very pleasant state of existence. Then you get to the fine material world, which is the realm above, that is only accessible through by achieving first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. And then you have the immaterial world, where you can only have access to it by accessing the formless jhanas. So Māra, obviously living in one of these really pleasant planes of existence, does not understand why Upacālā has no interest in being reborn anywhere, when there are so many great things to pick from. It's very important that then he follows with direct your mind there to those realms and you'll experience the light. So actually, it's interesting how Māra, at the same time, even though is a proponent of delusion, is also quite aware of causality, which is the central sort of teaching in Buddhism. So you put certain conditions into place and you get certain results, right? So the Buddha is very clear in mapping out how giving, so the practice of generosity creates the conditions for future material wealth, for example, or basically being kind and dwelling in metta creates the conditions for beauty, and so far and so forth. So it's Māra here is pointing out how actually all of these realms are completely accessible if one points their mind towards it, towards those resolutions, and says, well, once you do that, once you put all these conditions in place, then you'll experience the light, then you will be happy. In other words, what are you doing there meditating, putting all that effort into that meditation practice when, and actually not necessarily just putting effort into meditation practice, but rather putting effort in meditation practice to uproot all the defilements, when all you need is to do certain actions, or perhaps point your meditation practice in a particular direction so you can be reborn in these realms and experience the light. And Bhikkhuni Upacala says, yes, that's totally true. There are the Tavatim Sanyama Devas, and there are also Devatas of the Tusita realm, Devas who take delight in creating and Devas who exercise control. So she says, yes, that's completely true, Māra. And then she says, they are still bound by sensual bondage. They come again under Māra's control. And this is very key. So a lot of times we can get a little bit wrapped up with, you put these conditions in place, you get these results. So the practice of giving, once again, is an incredibly virtuous practice that can lead to incredible results. And it is true that all of these planes of existence are incredibly pleasant. Yet, one that has not transcended sensual pleasure. Yet, that is not the cessation of suffering. In fact, being reborn in some of these planes of existence can be an obstacle towards the path. And the reason why it's an obstacle towards the path, it's because it's incredibly pleasant. So it's very difficult when everything goes according to what we like and not according to what we dislike, to understand the first noble truth. And then obviously to aspire, to see the cause, obviously, of the first noble truth, the second noble truth. The cause is desire, and to want for the cessation of suffering to happen, and of course, even more so than to understand that there is a path, and to want to practice the path to begin with. So inevitably, in those circumstances, one is once again under Māra's control. It's impossible to transcend Māra once and for all. And that's why we talk about these endless cycles of existence, this endless birth and rebirth, because the truth is we've been in all, pretty much, if not all, almost all of these incredible abodes, in all these realms of existence. We've had the most pleasant experiences, both as humans and as non-humans. And we've had the worst experiences in past lives, both as humans and as non-humans. So we've been animals, we've been in all different hell realms, and we've been in all the sort of paradisiac states. So Dante Alighieri has visited us multiple times since discoveryless beginning. And yet, we only right now, have the opportunity to have the Dhamma and to transcend this constant cycle of birth and rebirth. And the Bhikkhuni Upacālā, we see that says, continues by saying, all the world is on fire, all the world is burning, all the world is ablaze, all the world is quaking. That which does not quake or blaze, that to which worldlings do not resort, where there is no place for Māra, that is where my mind delights. So all the world is on fire, all the world is burning, all the world is ablaze, all the world is quaking. Doesn't that sound familiar? Both if you're familiar with the suttas and also if you're just looking around. It's incredible. Here in the United States, in the past couple of months, California has been devoured by fire, devoured by climate change, fundamentally destroying everything. And prior to California, it was Australia. And if it's not Australia or California, it's other parts of the world that are literally on fire. And it was quite powerful in this last December, before the pandemic started. Bhante Suttazo and I were actually in Australia, in Sydney, and the whole sky was red and smoky gray, but the red was so intense, so powerful. All the flames that were surrounding the city, all the forests burnt down, the smell of burning trees, of burning everything, was in the nose. And that's when, the teachings of the Buddha really, the fire sermon, for those of who are more familiar with it. So the Aditta Pariyaya Sutta is one of the suttas that we like to chant in monasteries over and over again. And sometimes it can sound a little bit abstract, it's when the Buddha says everything is on fire. The ear is on fire, the nose is on fire, the eye is on fire, the mouth is on fire, the tongue is on fire, the body is on fire, everything is on fire. And as we are wrapped up in our delusion, it can seem so abstract. But when I was in Sydney, I have to say, it was so real, it was so tangible. But what the Buddha is really pointing out and saying that everything is on fire is that everything is burning with greed, hatred, and delusion. And that as we go about the world constantly craving things that we see, things that we hear, we listen to, things that we taste, things that we, touch, things that we think, all of the thoughts and ideas and wants in the mind. Whenever we fuel all of this, we start feeling it attached. Anything that we crave, we feel it attached, and we create the conditions to be willing to commit unwholesome actions in order to get all of this. And those unwholesome actions are what lead to hell realms. So it's not necessarily the thing itself. It's not, enjoying music, or it's not eating good food. It's not watching, shows or whatever it is that one is interested in. It's not the object in and of itself, but rather how we're approaching it. And what qualities of mind are we developing as we are experiencing sensual pleasure? And it's very difficult to experience sensual pleasure without getting attached to it. And once attached to it, to recognize that one is attached to it. And so that's what creates this sort of domino effect of then wanting more and more and more, and then breaking fundamentally all the precepts in order to get what we want, what we think is going to make us happy. And the Buddha instead tells us to do a different reflection. So to look at each one of these experiences and see them, analyze them for what they are: impermanent, constantly changing, unreliable. And once we see the nature of impermanence in sensual pleasure, then this passion arises. And when this passion arises, then we stop clinging naturally. So the word passion, we see how it's so related to fire and how this passion is related to cool. And everybody wants to be cool, right? So the Buddha was the one who made cool for the first time. And so that's the power of this passion, of creating the conditions for awakening, the conditions for the escape, fundamentally. So to transcend our greed, hatred, and delusion once and for all, and to realize for ourselves that there is a way out of suffering. There is a happiness that is not related to acquiring a different sort of shape of sensual pleasure. And that is why Bhikkhuni Upacālā describes this state of existence, or rather a state of existence. That's not a correct way of defining it, actually. But in this, she's pointing out at enlightenment, fundamentally, at the end of this sutta. So describes Nibbana as something that does not quake or blaze. And worldlings do not resort because they cannot go there. They cannot achieve what is currently unachievable for them, since they're so hung up with sensual pleasure. And there is no place for Māra, because Māra is the icon of greed, hatred, and delusion. And obviously, this is the supreme, blissful state of being, which is why there is, she says, the mind, that's where the mind delights. And as Venerable Upacālā shares all of this, then Māra immediately understands that there is nothing to do, right? Because Bhikkhuni Upacālā knows him, has seen him. There is no way through which Māra can play all his little tricks. So sad and disappointed, Māra disappears right there. There's no way to trick the enlightened beings into getting them, interested in sensual pleasures. They have transcended them all. All right, so let's see what other friends have to say. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to type them in the live chat, and I'll scroll up and see what you all have to say. All right, so Michael is saying, this sutta speaks to an issue I've been mulling over a long time, whether it's better to settle for heaven or go for the gold. My Buddhist friends fall on both sides of this coin. I think we covered that in the way that we've experienced heaven multiple times. It's just that we don't remember it. And that, once again, heaven is not the sort of solution to end suffering, but rather it's just a little nice pleasant break from suffering. But it's impermanent, like everything else. So really, our only option is the goal of Nibbana. It's very important to see it that way, and to put all the right conditions in order for Nibbana to become an option for us. And good to see that Melody is tuning in from Singapore. Wonderful. All right, and then Elaine says, at 60 years old in poor health and buried in defilements, have decided to go for a better rebirth and keep complete enlightenment as long-term goal. Sadhu, 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 Elaine. And don't worry about the buried in defilements. So we all are. But the important thing is not to focus on our defilements, but rather to focus on the purification of the defilements. And however long it takes. But if we really have the commitment to practice, we have the commitment to attain supreme Nibbana for the benefit of ourselves and others, then inevitably it will happen. So don't worry too much about being buried in defilements, because we all are. And so was the Buddha. So it's very refreshing to read the descriptions of the Buddha when he describes himself as an unenlightened bodhisattva. There are lovely suttas where he does that, and it's so human, so similar to us. So it's a good reminder that just as the Buddha was buried in defilements and attained awakening, so can we. Buried in defilement can eliminate all defilements, purify our mind, and attain awakening. And Elaine keeps saying, too depressing knowing what needs to be done and not having the capacity to do it. Yes, that's true, but you have the capacity to do it, so no need to be depressed. Very easy. And Melody is sharing that I heard based on Chinese Buddhism, there's many Buddhist paradise, like praying paradise, Western paradise, the paradise of rich and entertainment, and others. Yes, that's what we were going through during the suttas. So I'm not the best sort of monastic to give the teachings on Buddhist cosmology. Bhante Sudazo is much better than me, but actually Ajahn Punnadhammo is the most qualified of all. He's a Canadian monk who actually wrote extensive amount of material on analyzing all the different paradises and states of existence. I've never been particularly fond of researching that, just because I feel like it's a little bit of a distraction from my aim of enlightenment. So I like to know that they exist, but I don't want to know too much about it, so that to prevent craving from arising in my mind. And Eleanor says, don't we get sensual pleasures when meditating when the mind and body are peaceful? Could we get attached to wanting to feel that way? Yes, Eleanor, and you should actually get attached to wanting to feel that way. So there's that would be the attachment that leads to the end of the attachments. So sensual pleasures when meditating are actually something that at the very beginning we should nurture, that we should appreciate. And that's because it's very difficult at the very beginning to have a sort of pleasant sensation in meditation. It can be an incredible struggle, huge struggle, which then leads people to think that it's a waste of time, that they'd rather, go and take a run or a walk or whatever, watch TV or have a drink to, sort of relax and kind of get by with their days. And so there is actually a lot of wisdom in, on the other hand, paying attention to the pleasant sort of sensations that one can have in meditation, so that the factor of peacefulness of both body and mind is increased and leads towards progress in meditation practice, then once we are, as there's the simile of the raft that the Buddha shared. So we can say that all of these quote unquote attachments to practice, whether it's meditation practice or just the practice of generosity or practice of virtue, anything that is within the Noble Eightfold Path, that is the raft that we're going to use, and we're going to stay on it, really attached, because we're trying to go from one part of the river to the other. So you don't toss the raft, while you're trying to cross the river. You stay, you hold quite tightly to the raft. And then once you get to the other shore, you can get rid of the raft. You can, you don't need to pick up the raft and bring it with you. But until you reach the other shore, there's no need to worry about getting attached to Buddhist practice. You should be wanting to do that. And Gita is asking, but if one is reborn in one of the 5 pure abodes, there is no further coming back to any state of samsaric existence. One has entered the path, one has entered the irreversible path to Nibbana. So I seem to understand it. Once again, I haven't done too much research, too much study, I will admit, on the pure abodes, or in general, all the, as I mentioned, these Buddhist cosmology. I kind of have broad strokes, but not like in detail. But I seem to understand that, yes, the 5 pure abodes, one enters them at a stage of the path, which is then irreversible. So then that leads to Nibbana, but it's not entering the particular abode that leads to Nibbana, but rather what one has achieved up until then that creates the conditions to attain Nibbana. But it would be best if you would ask Bhante Suttazo next week to be 100% sure of the answer, because once again, I am not the expert of cosmology. And Kristen says, I'm studying to be a doctor, which I see as a worthy pursuit because it comes out of the desire to serve others. But I don't know if I could maintain the effort to do this without desire, aspiration. First of all, Kristen, this is really beautiful that you are studying to help others. So your wish to help is incredibly beautiful in accordance to Dhamma. So once again, this is no different than the question that Eleanor asked earlier. So yes, absolutely. You should nurture your desire to help others, because that is a desire that leads to the end of the desires. So what is your duty in while studying and practicing as a doctor is to watch your mind and see the wholesome desire of helping others is to be nurtured. But perhaps the desire of becoming a better doctor than your friend doctor, a more successful doctor than your friend doctor, or a better paid doctor than your other friend doctor, those sort of conceits of I am better, or I'm worse, or I'm equal, or whatever it is, that needs to be tossed away. But anything that is helping yourself and others, that needs to be nurtured, because it is something wholesome that leads to liberation. And Gita is asking, Ayya, we have heard in Mahayana that we're all born with bodhicitta. It's up to us to awaken to the truth by following the Noble Eightfold Path. And then you're specifying awaken our mind state to the escape from samsara suffering. So I'm not quite sure exactly in the details what the Mahayana tradition says, especially because there are a lot of different traditions within Mahayana, including Vajrayana. But I have what I constantly hear from teachers is actually of the Mahayana tradition is to nurture bodhicitta. So nurture the mind of awakening, nurture the desire to transcend suffering fundamentally. So yes, it is up to us to awaken to the truth, and we definitely can only do that by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. But it's important. Sometimes you'll hear that we're already enlightened. In the Mahayana tradition, they like to, especially in the Zen tradition, to make statements of this sort that can be a little bit confusing sometimes, because we're like, oh, well, if we're already enlightened, then why should we even practice the Noble Eightfold Path? But what that aims to say is that, it's kind of like a stained glass, for example. The glass is transparent and simple by default, but it's stained. So our duty is still to polish the glass so that it can return to its sort of purified state. So it's not that the glass needs to turn into a ceramic cup, so to speak. So we're not trying to do that. We're not trying to transform, become something different, but rather purify the mind and come to an understanding of the sort of the nature of existence, of the nature of reality, of the cessation of great hatred and delusion. But to do that, we definitely have to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. We can't not do anything, so to speak. There has to be right effort. The Buddha talks about it over and over again, that we have to put all the conditions in place for awakening. And Melody says, we do learn things in like the Buddha said, suffering, delusion, anger, feelings. However, if we realize one day as we learn with Dhamma, things will start to get clearer as time goes by. Yes, exactly. So all of this is not intellectual learning, but something that we need to realize for ourselves. So the contemplation of suffering, of the First Noble Truth, that there is suffering, it is our duty to analyze our experience and check, is this really what the Buddha says? What is the Buddha saying first and foremost? And how does it match my experience of reality? Oh, hello, Jessica. Good to see you online. And Eleanor says, has it happened that some did not let go of the raft after reaching the other shore? Not sure if it really matters right now, as I'm so far from that shore and still need to build a strong raft. Well, Eleanor, fundamentally, once you reach the other shore, you will let go of the raft inevitably, because there is nothing that you can attach to anymore, including the Dhamma, including the teachings of the Buddha. Once you've done the job, there is no clinging left in the mind. So it's not something that one will do. They will go like, hey, now I am not attaching. I decide not to attach to the Dhamma or to the teachings, but rather there are no conditions in place to attach to anything, including the teachings, to begin with. And Eleanor says also, Ajahn Brahm said something about doctors. He said they should care for patients and not want to cure them, as this would lead to suffering when they don't manage to cure the patients. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds quite sensible. Caring for the patients. So it is, it depends on how one approaches curing them. But if that means curing them with the sort of idea that either the patient will be healthy or they won't have done their job, then of course that will lead to suffering. But if one can have unconditional caring, unconditional love for the patients, or for anyone really, then that is caring and curing, because you're actually like releasing them from suffering. Even if you're not able to physically cure them, you're able to cure them spiritually. Having someone that takes care of you, physically, also takes care of you mentally. It's a really heartwarming feeling. Lately, I've been a bit sick at the monastery, and all my fellow monastics were taking care of me, and curing me too. They gave me medicine, etc. And then I've become a little bit better. And but it was extremely heartwarming to know that I live in a community where people are caring for me. And Kristen is saying, I have worked with hospice patients before, so I've seen the pain of being unable to cure, especially in the family members. But the family members need care too at that point. Yes, it's very difficult work, but it's also incredibly good work, incredibly wholesome work, and especially helping people in those particular situations really can give us a glimpse of a true, like, insightful glimpse in the First Noble Truth, because this is what real suffering is. This is the suffering that we're trying to transcend. It's not the suffering of breaking our nails after a manicure, or whatever, getting not finding the right cereal that we wanted at the supermarket or whatnot. But we're talking about old age, sickness, and death. So that is what characterizes the existence of all sentient beings, and that is what that suffering, if you've lost anyone that you care about, that is the suffering we're trying to transcend. Or if you see your parents becoming decrepit, losing their faculties, their mental faculties, their physical faculties, that's the old age that we're talking about, or the sickness, deathly diseases. We all will die of a deathly disease. And that's what we're trying to transcend here, what we're trying to work here. That is the First Noble Truth. All right. Okay, so I think that's all. Oh, you're all very sweet. Yes, I'm feeling better now, but if I won't, that's just part of having a body. We're going to talk about it actually this evening, I believe. So the theme will be sickness. So lots of interesting topics to talk about during this week. Sickness today, and tomorrow overeating in the evening, which is probably something that a lot of friends are experiencing during the pandemic and during the lockdown, as well as just in general. So tomorrow morning we will be continuing with the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, as well as Friday morning. You're going to have an intensive Ayya Soma week. So also Friday evening, actually, monk chat will be just with me. So if you have any questions for me for Friday, you can start writing them down and bring them there. All right. So we can end the morning with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And have a great rest of the day, or have a great night if you're on the other side of the world. And I look forward to practicing with you all soon.